mushrooms are a funny thing. We really can't control the experience. We can, intention setting is a really vital piece of the experience. So thinking about what it is you hope to experience during your journey. But then I coach people to then let that go, because the mushrooms will work their magic in the way that they see fit. We often say that you might not get what you want, but you will get what you need.
Yeah. Almost like it's going to show you what you need to see rather than what you're hoping to see.
Absolutely.
What's up, you beautiful beasts? I'm Katie. I'm on a mission to help humans become their favorite versions of themselves and to strive for overall health by healing their relationship to food and exercise, healing their relationship to their body, and most importantly, healing their relationship to themselves, all without ever having to step on a scale. I have had the privilege to talk to all kinds of different humans who have been through a plethora of experiences just being a human and existing. I believe that every single time someone shares their story, at least one person listening will learn from it, be inspired by it, and maybe, just maybe, even change the entire direction of their life. These are the stories of humans unveiling their beautiful beast. Keep listening. This is the Unveiling the Beast podcast. Well, welcome to the Unveiling the Beast podcast.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Can you tell me a little bit about who you are and why you think you are who you are?
Oh boy. Oh, those are such big questions. And I've been diving into this idea of identity lately. So, yeah, I think so often we identify ourselves with our roles, and then those roles change. And then we're left in this crisis of, oh my God, who am I? Right? And so that's something that kind of a bit of a theme for me, especially as I work with empty nesters and those who suddenly don't feel like their primary role is a mom anymore, and how hard that can be. So anyway, back to your question. I'll start with my values. I really love, really identify strongly with the ideas of compassion and love and connection and growth. And I've been very interested in self-development and growth for as long as I can really remember. So that's really pushed me to, or inspired me really to keep learning about myself and the world and people. So now I work as a coach and used to work as a psychologist. And when I closed my practice as a psychologist, that was my first experience with that loss of that role that I had identified with. And that really plunged me into some depression, but also it helped me to look more deeply and figure out who I was. So that's a little bit about who I am. I'm also a psilocybin facilitator. I became licensed in the state of Oregon back in March. So that's a new one for me and pretty exciting.
Are you the one I was talking with about this and how I referenced you to another episode, or was that somebody else?
I think it was somebody else.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah, I interviewed Chase Daniels. He's a buddy of mine from high school, actually. And we actually talked about psilocybin in his episode. It wasn't like a huge long chat, but it was the first time I had been introduced to it. So yeah, I'll reference that in the show notes for the listeners. So but yeah, on the topic of identities, that's a big one because we don't just have one identity, we have multiple identities. And one thing that my coach did with me when I was learning about my own identities was naming them. And so I've got like naughty Natasha, I've got clean freak Carrie, and I've got like, all these different things. So it makes it really fun. Listeners, I highly encourage you to figure out your identities and name them. And there's a lot, we have a lot of identities. And so when one of them, which is attached to a role, disappears, it's kind of like we get this void and we don't know what to do.
Yeah, yeah. And what you say reminds me of IFS. I'm not sure if you're familiar with internal family systems.
Mm-mm.
So that's a framework that deals in parts. So, the concept is that we all, as we're younger, we have this, this self, and then something happens and we might get shamed or bullied or traumatized in some way. And we hold all these feelings around that experience of
Mm.
overwhelm or pain in some way. And so we develop these parts of ourselves to protect
Mm-hmm.
us and to push down that pain and that what we call that young exile.
Yeah.
And so these parts are protectors or managers. And so they might be, the one who has to keep everything clean and organized. Or it could be, the class clown, or the one that has to control their eating, or one who drinks. There can be many, many different things. It could be responsibility part, many, many parts. But then those parts can, continue to push down that young exile. And so that doesn't get
Mm-hmm.
healed. And so if we can then start to work with those parts and help them live more in harmony with one another, because they can really be at odds.
Mm-hmm.
And then with their permission, they can allow us access to that young exile so we can actually heal that part of us, that young part of us. So anyway, that's a quick IFS
No, I
overview.
I love that because it's kind of part of my work, only I've never labeled it IFS before. It's just, I talk about unveiling your beast. Your beast is the true you, and the veils are all these layers of protection that we've put on throughout our lives that, we don't have to hold on to them. So
Yeah.
like let's start unveiling one at a time. And so I love that there's like essentially the same idea of work with different names. And
Yeah.
whatever name works for you is what you can use.
Yeah. Just slightly different perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your what's your specialty answer, you mentioned relationships. And that kind of stuck out because I don't think I've had too many relationship people on here. And so if that's okay with you, I'd like to dig into that a little bit.
Sure. Hmm.
Um, so particularly, one of my pillows of health is healthy relationships. So how would you describe or explain how relationships can affect our physical and mental health?
Mm. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, I actually have it right here by
Nice.
coincidence, is this book called The Good Life. So it's by Robert Waldinger and Marc Schulz, and they're out of Harvard, and they've been running this study that's been going on since 1939.
Hmm.
And they have followed these people to try to understand what makes for a good life. And when they ask people nowadays what they think it is, oftentimes they'll say, "Oh, it's having a big house, or having a nice car, or having a comfortable income, or a lot of these things to do with money or power."
Mhm.
And that's not at all what makes people happy. What makes people happy is having good, solid, healthy relationships. And that's just been borne out through this whole study, but also lots of little studies within that, and then related studies that they've then called on to see if to validate what they have found. And they take physical measures and and they have these long questionnaires, and I mean, there's all kinds of information that they collect. So it's a really robust study, and it's pretty clear. Their results are very clear. Relationships matter, and yeah, they do impact our mental health, but also our physical health.
Yeah. Now, in your definition of relationships, is that with people, or do you also include like relationship to self, relationship to food, relationship to exercise?
So I don't go into the health and exercise piece, although I love those areas personally, and those are super important to me. But it's not what I specialize in. So what I help people is with their connection with others and their connection with themselves,
Mm,
and that self connection is just such a central piece of it, as you know.
yeah,
Yeah, if we don't have a healthy connection with ourselves, then it's really hard to have a healthy one with other people.
yeah.
Yeah.
I spent most of my life hating myself. And this past, I want to say like year and a half, 2 years, however long, doesn't matter how long, um, I've been repairing that relationship with myself. And what's helped is knowing that like I don't know what's going to happen in life, right? But I do know that when I turn a new corner, there's one thing for sure that's going to be there, and it's going to be me. And so, and this is cool because I recently had a session with a coach, and I've been saying for a while now, I have to have my own back. I have to have my own back. And he said, that implies that you're in danger. How about you have your own heart? And I was just like, woo! So beautiful.
Oh,
So,
I love that. I love that. Yeah, well said.
yeah. So it's a lot of work. I mean, if you spend most of your existence hating yourself, I feel like the self-love just shows up in such a big way. Um, I'm not even sure where I'm going with this thought, but like everything is bigger. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like what you're doing to get there, how you're showing yourself that self love.
I'm doing things like instead of let me think of an example. Oh, like instead of going to the gym to punish myself for something I ate, I go to the gym because I love to move my body. And to me, movement is, I mean, it's good for my physical health, but it's an act of love towards myself, if that makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
like doing things out of love versus doing things out of hate. Like, I'm going to eat this salad because I need to shrink my body. No, I'm going to eat this salad because I like the way it tastes and I
Yeah.
feel good afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it sounds like you're listening to your body more, but also reframing how you think about things and what
Yeah.
you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's constant. It's constant work because one of the biggest concepts that has changed my life in this last year or so is noticing without judging. And so that means noticing things that I do, noticing things that I feel, um, and not judging it. But what it's doing is it brings it into your awareness. And once you're aware of something, then you have the choice whether or not you want to fix it.
That's
And
right.
so
Yeah.
keeping that in mind. And then if you do judge the thought or whatever the thing is, then notice that you judged it. So,
Right.
and so it's this constant, I want to be aware of everything in my life and everything inside of me and everything that I think and everything that I feel so that it gives me a better idea of who I am.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me, I just gave a presentation to a business group last week and talked about, raising your energy and having more choices for how you show up in the different areas of your life. And that judgment is one of the biggest pieces that you can work on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can become aware of every time you make a judgment. And then you can then decide to replace that, with perhaps curiosity, and start to shift that. And your energy will absolutely increase, and you're going to feel better, and you're going to be open to other possibilities when you do that.
Yeah. So let's take a hard left.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about psilocybin.
Sure.
Let's pretend I've never heard of it before, and you can, I guess, school me.
Sure.
Teach me.
I would love to. So I think that this actually goes really well with what we're talking about, because I think psilocybin ultimately helps with connection. Connection with self, and also connection with our partners, everyone in our lives, our communities, the earth, and beyond, spirit, if that's something that you want to explore. So psilocybin is the active compound in over 200 species of mushrooms, so otherwise known as magic mushrooms. And it is something that has been used in many different cultures around the world for probably centuries, but we don't know that for sure. And, there are some who will tell you that it is responsible for the evolution of our species and the development of things that like speech and higher thinking. Again, we don't know that for sure, but they make some compelling arguments for it, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But currently, it was just legalized in Oregon about a year and a half ago, so that people can, with a licensed facilitator at a licensed service center, take psilocybin to heal, connect, grow, whatever they really want to do with it. And it's exciting because there's so much research right now showing us the myriad ways that it can help us. Most of the research has been around depression, especially treatment-resistant depression, but also anxiety, PTSD, addiction, body image, OCD. But again, things like spiritual connection and trying to understand that thing that happened to you when you were younger. Why do you have this reaction now? I want to understand that. And where do I take it? So when you have these experiences, it's really just the first step. So people will sit with the medicine, and then they will usually get some type of insight or learn something about themselves. And then they're invited to do the work around that. So you found out that the reason that you're so sensitive to rejection is because of all the loss you experienced when you were young. Okay, so what are you going to do with that now? So then it's up to you to figure out and work with somebody or yourself or a group or whatever it is, to integrate that into your life and to make some changes. And the exciting part is that, what it does is that it really, there are a lot of ways that it acts on the brain, but it makes your brain more flexible. So you might have heard of the term neuroplasticity. And so those 3 days following, your brain is particularly flexible, but then really for about the next month or so afterwards. And so you have this window of time where it's easier to start making some changes that might be more adaptable for you, more healthy for you, or basically just what you want. But then you really can take that experience forward as well. There's so much to be gained. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at these at these licensed facilities, do they just extract the drug from the mushroom, or do they give the actual mushroom? How does that work?
So there are also licensed manufacturers.
Okay.
And so the service center will contract with the manufacturer, and they're actual mushrooms that are grown and then packaged in certain in certain weights, and then at the service center, when you go to have your appointment, you and your facilitator will decide on how much you're going to take, and so you purchase that from the service center, and then you take your mushrooms.
Interesting. This is fascinating stuff. My friend that I was talking about, he lives in Oregon, and so it makes sense that, yeah.
Yeah, and there are 9 other states currently with active legislation around legalization, or some are working on things like making it legal, similar to Oregon, and now Colorado is on board as well. But also like decriminalization or
Mm,
deprioritization as well. So there are different ways that states are approaching it.
mm. Similar to, but not the same as when they legalized marijuana in California. Um, I personally have never liked marijuana, but I know that it does help people. And so I'm not one to judge anybody. And so when I heard of psilocybin, I'm like, this is cool because these things come from nature, essentially. I mean, I know people grow them, but these are like nature's I don't know the word I want to use. Nature's something or other.
Yeah,
Nature's,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
helpers.
it's like a natural way of us to, yeah, to heal. There's,
Yeah.
Maria Sabina is, the famous woman who lived in the mountains above Oaxaca, Mexico, and she was a shaman who essentially, well, she called them little teachers.
Hmm.
But it was through her that an American-born, I think he was American-born woman, and his wife brought them that then back to the United States. Learned about them, had these experiences, and it was a lot of fallout, and she suffered a lot from all of that happened, because a lot of Americans and other Westerners then flocked to that area
Hmm.
to try to have those experiences. But anyway, that was the way they ended up being introduced in modern times, at least, to North America, or to the United States, I should say.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How did you get into it? Just curious.
Yeah. I was never interested in psychedelics. I have certainly tried cannabis, but it's never been my thing either. I think
Hmm.
I did it more when I was younger because my friends were doing it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was never really my thing. And I had heard all the stories about psychedelics and really thought it was crazy to want to use it. I didn't understand. But then Michael Pollan is a science writer, a popular science writer, and I had read a bunch of his work. He, wrote books like the carnivore's the carnivore's dilemma. Is that the omnivore's dilemma? Sorry, and other books that I really loved. And so he ended up writing a book about psychedelics, and I thought, oh, well, that's really interesting. So I read it and was absolutely fascinated. And I know this is a lot of people's experience. That's how they get introduced to this nowadays. He's also got a Netflix show now about different psychedelics too. And my first thought was, well, this might be really helpful at some point to my son, who's neurodivergent and has some inflexible thinking. And I thought, well, this might be really helpful. But I was also curious for myself. And so I ended up finding pretty easily a Portland psychedelic group, women's group, and met some really wonderful people there, and eventually found a woman who was sitting with people and having these experiences. So I really wanted to try it. So I had an experience, and I was super nervous, like most people are, which is very typical and very nervous and understandable, or very understandable.
Yeah.
And then the first maybe 45 minutes or an hour were really hard because I was just so anxious. It just amped up my anxiety.
Mm.
And then it was like all of a sudden I was through and on the other side. And I was just at the beginning of a divorce process at that time and was really worried, especially about my kids. But also for myself, and didn't know how I was going to handle it and how that was going to go. And I just felt held in the experience and felt this deep knowing that it was going to be okay. I felt connected with something beyond myself for the first time since maybe I was in middle school. I had been up until that point a staunch atheist. It's like, not only am I unsure, but I was sure there was nothing beyond this earth. And that completely blew the doors open for me. And I cried and cried and cried the whole time. Not like tears of sadness, and it didn't feel very physical. I just had the tears streaming down my face the whole time. And it was beautiful. So that was my first experience. And I didn't know if I would want a second one because it just was so big. I knew that I was not in danger of abusing this substance, and people generally don't. It's a pretty big experience for people. So most people take time in between their journeys, which is healthy. But I've had, I think, around 5 total, maybe around there, experiences now. And perhaps the most important was when I had that feeling of self-love during one experience. I wanted to have that and know what that was really like. And that is something, even though it was, I don't know, good few years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, I can still touch into and remember that feeling and bring it forward.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's been really important for me.
Yeah. The experience for you, what I'm hearing, was big enough for you to want to help other people experience it too. Is that right?
Yes. And for a while, I didn't know how that was going to work because it wasn't legal. And I did have some contacts, but getting into the work and getting some training and being a good guide is something that it's hard to figure out how to do necessarily for most people. So at some point I gave up because I thought, well, I guess this maybe isn't meant for me. Maybe I'm just meant to do the relationship coaching because I love that. And then it was legalized. And then I thought, but it's so expensive to get trained, and I don't want this to be just for people who are wealthy. I mean, gosh, some of the people who need it the most are those who have experienced a lot of trauma and can't afford it. So I didn't pursue it for a while. And then I met a woman at a networking event who had just become licensed, and I was on her like glue. And she was wonderful. And actually, we've gotten a lot closer and now do a lot of work together, which is wonderful. But I was sucked in, but at the same time, I was really conscious about what I might be choosing for myself. And I took some time to really think about it. Is this the path that I want to take? It was going to be a big investment, and I wanted to make sure that was the direction that I really wanted to go. But ultimately, decided to go ahead, and it's just been so powerful. It's just sitting with people who are having some of the most profound experiences has been just life-changing. Seeing them have these life-changing experiences, but also feeling the honor of just feeling honored to be with them and witness them and hold their hands and help them to have the most rewarding experience possible. It's just been really, really wonderful.
I have a burning question in my brain. Do you ever or have you ever blended the relationship coaching with the psilocybin expertise?
Such a great question, because they actually do go well together. And this person that I had mentioned earlier, we have just put together a program for couples. So we haven't officially launched it yet, but it, there's research showing that it helps people with their communication. It helps improve people's sexual satisfaction with one another. It helps them with things such as anxious attachment. We're still learning a lot, but those are just some of the highlights that we've learned so far, and how well it can help people. And it also is really wonderful, we know anecdotally, for helping people to understand why they react in certain ways that they do. And it helps to give them a path forward. So it has, I think, incredible potential for couples and individuals who just want to improve their relationship with themselves or anything else.
Yeah. That is so important. Relationship with self.
Yeah. And that's how I've used it most of all, is really learning about myself and figuring out how I want to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I also want to back up and say that, mushrooms are a funny thing. We really can't control the experience. We can, intention setting is a really vital piece of the experience. So thinking about what it is you hope to experience during your journey. But then I coach people to then let that go, because the mushrooms will work their magic in the way that they see fit. We often say that you might not get what you want, but you will get what you need.
Yeah. Almost like it's going to show you what you need to see rather than what you're hoping to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually my last experience was a really great illustration of that. I had gone into it asking about my business, because I was kind of torn between a few different things that I was thinking of, and I was really wanted to figure out which way to go and how I could connect with certain people better and just raise my overall vibe in my business, essentially. And mushrooms, no. No, we're not going to go there. But what I want you to do is I want you to look at this stuff with your dad. And I'd experienced a break in the relationship with my dad a couple years ago that was super, super painful. And I was able to really feel forgiveness and love for him at this level that was just so intense and beautiful. And afterwards, I'm like, oh, damn it. I got to go there. And yet I know that it was speaking the truth. I knew that. And it was funny because it was only a couple months later when it dawned on me. It was like, oh, this is about my business.
I was just going to ask, did it end up relating back?
Yeah, because when we hold on to things and we hold on to these hurts, we somehow still, even unintentionally, I think often lead with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes through in how we present ourselves, and other people pick up on that energy.
Yeah.
And I think it does block us. And so that has helped tremendously.
Yeah. One of the things that we say a lot in my coaching community is, in order to understand the behavior, we have to understand the behavior. And that, to me, goes along the lines of, hey, before you worry about this thing over here with your business and what you're going to do next, you have to understand you and this relationship you have with your father, or falling out, or whatever it was. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mushrooms, I mean, I think they really work very well with our inner healing intelligence and really tap into that. I mean, ultimately, I think it's us that has the answers within us that the mushrooms tap into.
Yeah.
And so being able to trust that can go a long way in having the kind of experience that that will benefit you.
Yeah. And also, like, knowing that you're the one with the answers and the mushrooms are helping you see your answers. I think it enhances your relationship with yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can help you clear those blocks and see those
Mm-hmm.
blocks and see things, yeah, through a lens of love.
Mm-hmm. I love this so much. Um, well, I do have one more question for you, and that is, if you had one piece of advice that you could give to the world, what would it be?
I believe that what is at the heart of so much of our pain and challenges in the world is disconnection. And if people can learn how to connect with themselves, I think that that would go a long way in just creating a lot more love in the world and a lot more healing. And that's going to look different for everybody. I think that it's my belief that a lot of that disconnection can be from trauma, or these little events that build on themselves starting when we were young. And if we can learn to reconnect, learn to accept ourselves and even love ourselves, show ourselves some compassion, learn to trust ourselves, and work through some of those things that are getting in our way, such as, that resentment, like I was talking about. I think that goes a long way in reconnection. And it can be through using mushrooms, or it can be through many other different ways.
Beautiful Beasts, Karin Caldy signing off. Until next time.